you guys so much. This turnout is so amazing. I'm so happy to see so many new and familiar faces. Like she said, my name is Irene. I'm the managing editor at models.com. And I'm so happy to have these two guests here who are huge pillars within the fashion community. The lovely Lindsay Peoples, editor-in-chief at The Cut, former editor-in-chief at Teen Vogue, the youngest editor-in-chief at any Condé Nast title, and Kyle Hagler, the amazing Kyle Hagler, who, if you know anything about model history, has made the careers of top models like Joan Smalls, Anak Yai, really one of the OGs of the business. So I'm so grateful to have the both of you here for this great conversation between models.com. Thank you. Models.com. Lindsay also is the head co-founder of Black in Fashion Council with the lovely Sandrine Charles, who I believe is not here, but love her. And what they have done in the past 2 or so years has really been a galvanizing community effort, and the fact that they're bringing together so many people within the fashion community who haven't really found like a safe space. So I honestly, I think that it's been a crazy year in fashion, and I think that, crazy year in life. And the past 2 years, I feel like we're kind of, sort of coming out of something. And now that the dust is kind of settling, I was so kind of hyper-focused on where are we and what's next. And Kyle, starting off with you, I remember first meeting you. I won't go into the details, but I remember first meeting you and being in awe that I met a Black person in fashion. I think it was like a abominable snowman. But I think from when our era, when you were first really starting in the modeling industry, we were at moments where you were the only one. And now I wanted to turn the question over to you as we've kind of evolved into this space where it's not to say that you might be the only person in the room, but you might be the only person of influence. And how has it kind of evolved since when you were first starting to now this current moment? Do you think we've moved forward, especially within the space of management, which is very behind the scenes?
I would say that we definitely have moved forward. I think people like Beth Ann Hardison and Lindsay Peoples, I would say, have accelerated this conversation in many ways. I was not the only person of influence that happened to be Black in the room, but we were few and far between. And I think the business made us feel, some of us, that it was one or the other. And there was a bit of competitiveness that almost undermined an understanding around the support of the community generally. And there were others of us that were very based and focused on building with our own and with others as well. I think one of the things that really makes me happy now is to see someone like Lindsay, who really just takes the bull by its horns and takes the responsibility on, even though she has tons of responsibilities going on already, and brings us all together and has a fight in her that is impressive and something that is transformative. So no, I mean that. And I think that, it's great to see that all the inroads and all the fights that we had on our own in a very different way manifested into this. Mm-hmm. And so I do believe we're in a different space now. I will say that I think in order to further the conversation, we have to continue to speak about equity and not just visibility. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's it.
And taking it to you, Lindsay, what Kyle just mentioned as far as like the accomplishments you've been able to do in a very, relatively young age, that's not something to kind of, sweep under the rug. And I want to take it to when you first started and wanted to, join fashion, I assume. I don't even know, like, how was your kind of like come to moment when you were like, oh, I want to kind of be an editor? And then how is that path to being the youngest editor-in-chief at a huge title like that?
Thank you also for being so kind.
Very welcome.
It's always so lovely. I mean, it was a long, I think it's been a long journey. It still feels like there's so much to do. We always talk about, I think the industry has come a long way, but I think that not nearly done. I think we've only really scratched the surface. It can be a little bit daunting to think about all the things that I want to change, but I think that was the thing that also really made me want to work in fashion, was that I felt like I had something to say and I had something to do differently than other people. I am from the Midwest, and so my introduction to fashion was TV. It was Girlfriend, Sex and the City, The Hills, normal things. But I think when I came here, I realized how different it was going to be, and I realized that I felt very alienated. I felt very like, if there were Black people, it was really hard to kind of bond with them, because it felt like he was saying, there could be only one of us, or you had to be a certain kind of Black girl that I am not. And I think that over time, I just felt like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the way that I really want to do it, which to me was a bit more, a bit more relentless and a little bit more honest in the way of like what I felt like really actually needed to change the industry, and not just things that were, frontward facing of just, okay, we put a Black actress on the cover, but we treat everyone here who is Black like shit. To me, it was a different mandate, and I think, a lot has changed again, but I think that, obviously Kyle and I have been doing this for a while now, so it still feels like there's so much to do.
Absolutely. You said it just now, and that kind of feeling of alienation, I really want to hone in on that, because I think a lot of people within the industry often lament about not really having a sense of community. Like you mentioned, it feels like we're kind of just all spread out and just blown to the wind. And what you and Sandrine did 2 years ago, mind you, it was not out of the Black Lives Matter protest, but it was a very particular moment in history when I felt like a lot of people were looking at how they could also change and affect change within their own industries. And what you guys were able to do in that community effort, really bringing people together, I wanted to ask, how did you guys first come upon that idea, and how has it kind of evolved to now? Because I remember initially it was very much a, we want to come together, we have these demands. How has it kind of grown in the past 2 years?
It was a long time coming. I remember when I was, I was working at style.com, if anybody remembers style.com.
Oh, I remember style.
Shout out, it was a great publication. Miss it every day. When I was working at style.com, I had started this group called Women of Color in Fashion. And it was a group of us, Julie Wilson, and it was a group of us that would come in my apartment. And we would just, talk about what are we gonna do, and how we would deal with different situations. And we would just bond over okay, how do we give each other advice and support each other? And then, many years later, when I started to work at The Cut as an editor, when I did the piece about what it's like to be Black in fashion, obviously I had talked to all of these Black people in fashion, Kyle included, of just your experiences and all of that. And so that kind of brought a bigger group of us together from that, and obviously a lot of conversation around all of our experiences, which to me really changed my thinking about it, because it felt like we're all having these siloed experiences, so why aren't we talking about them more, and why aren't we coming together more? If we're all struggling, we could just help each other up. And it felt, it was really emotional, but I think also it felt like a lot of people subconsciously had just a lot of pride around it, of not wanting to admit that, hey, it may look this way on Instagram, but I really am actually struggling. I'm actually really having a hard time. And so I think that then a lot of people that were part of that then just started to talk a lot during early pandemic timing, over Zoom. And Sandrine and I had been friends for years. And so that's really how it then came about, of I think we actually want to do something a little bit bigger with this. And I think most of it really came from the idea that we felt like people just kept making excuses, and I just didn't want to hear it anymore. And I think also it just felt like for a very long time, I was convinced that somebody else was going to do it. So I was kind of this is dumb. Like by the time I do it, it's not even gonna matter to anyone. But it never happened. So yeah, it just started out of like we really wanted to help young designers, and so we have the showroom at IMG every season, and it's been really cool to see people like Edwin from Theophilio and all the brands being able to now actually have a show by themselves and actually be able to afford it and all of that and get the press that they deserve. So a lot of it has been a long time coming of, I think, providing the industry a way that they can't have excuses and also helping Black people in fashion. But it has not been overnight by no means.
Absolutely. I mean, you just said it yourself. It was like years in the making. But what you described is what, you mentioned Beth Ann Hardison and what she's been able to do behind the scenes. Obviously at models.com, we've provided our platform to that constantly, but the organization is not a small feat, right? To get all these people in one room and say that I see you and I'm looking out for you, it's always an amazing thing to hear about that, especially within the creative space, because again, going back to that, it felt like a lot of people were like in search of community and in search of mentorship. And Kyle, you facilitate connections all the time. That's literally your MO. Plus the MO of every agent, I would hope. And so I wanted to ask, it's easy to do that for your clients, but how has it been to do that behind the scenes for the people that you want to kind of, raise up? Like, do you mentor? Like, how is it kind of like touching back and reaching back to the next generation? Because again, within the agent space, modeling and creative, I find that, diversity is not necessarily thought about behind the scenes.
Well, I would say that I think to be a good agent, which I think I am, you have to be considerate of a lot. And I think you have to appreciate all of the things that help contribute to the growth and evolution of the careers that you manage. And so for me to just care about a model when I was just a model agent would be short-sighted. So for me, I've always been able to identify new, interesting talent, thankfully also Black, new, interesting talent, and help them with the expertise that I have navigate spaces that were unfamiliar to them, and help support them by giving them talent, by giving them direction, helping them get bigger, better jobs so that they can evolve their business. Even though it wasn't something that I made money on, I felt like to pour into them would eventually be something that would pour into this thing generally in terms of creativity and expansion of ideas and appreciation of expanded beauty understandings. So it was important that I did that. And then the other side of it is like in mentorship, I think a lot of people think of mentorship as this one directional kind of understanding that somebody in need goes to somebody who does not need and benefits from that exercise, but the person who does not need never benefits from it. And I think it's a reciprocal understanding where at certain points in life, because time moves on, at some point you're top dog and there's somebody who doesn't have that same understanding and you help lift them up. But then at some point you get older and that newness and that new vision helps inform old processes in different ways to make you competitive. So it becomes this circular kind of understanding if it actually works in its most intentional way. So yeah, I've always mentored, I've always been a part of a process because I think the community itself has built me up. And I think that a lot of this energy that I got, even at a point when I didn't have a proof of concept and wasn't the Kyle of today with like accolades and rewards and a resume, somebody gave me a shot. And I think we just have to give people a shot. And we have to look at people and see Black people especially, because the thing that I can see always is that it's not that we're not good or not capable of being in this space, we're never given the opportunity or rarely given the opportunity. And I think we have to support that. Bigger, better, better.
I was just talking about this with Jaleesa in the sense of it's not a given that people would understand who to contact when they want to reach out to someone. Some people don't like Instagram, you reach out to their DMs, they're like, don't do that. Or, if you go the process of trying to get in touch with someone's agent, it's like you need to have that, that's not, that's kind of like different level of education as far as fashion, to know that someone is represented by streeters, to know that someone is represented by CLM and the production companies. And so I find that a lot of people just don't know. They don't know how to reach out to people who they almost feel like are like celebrities in a sense.
I think some people do know too, and I think with the flow of information now, different than when I was coming up as a kid, I think there's a lot of information that's there. Even models.com is an amazing, tremendous resource of information around the fashion space. Who's who, who's what, who's represented by who. But I think the other side of this is that fear inserts itself, and I think most of us, the biggest thing that we have to confront is fighting ourselves to get to the spaces where we want to go. And I think we just have to encourage people to just go after the thing and not think about it in this like respectability politic, but just go like, hell, if I can only get to you from a DM, I'm going to try that. If I can get to you through an email, I'm going to try that. If I got to show up at the office, I'll try that. And knowing that sometimes you're going to be rejected or not even seen because people don't know you, but it doesn't mean that you don't matter. It just means that you just got to try harder. But I think from us who are in the inside, we have to be more cognizant of the fact that there are people who are good or have the capability to be big in this space, and just try to find and sieve them out through the public as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Lindsay, you kind of touched on this talking about, you know, a lot of designers that are on your radar. You mentioned Theophilio, who, I mean, if you are paying attention to fashion, you know, the great Carlos Nazario is styling his show, top models walking in. To see his growth from even 2-3 years ago to now is definitely like a huge, you know, vast like expansion in that sense. What other designers are kind of on your radar? Because I know that BIFC definitely does like a great initiative in plugging and pushing designers. I saw Ben on Water, I thought, or Who Decides War, Theophilio, like all these brands I kind of have on my radar, but who's on your radar?
Oh, this is a good one. I'm thinking. Honestly, I still have some like old favorites of people that I've known for a really long time. I'm a huge Hanifa fan. I think she's a sweetheart, and I think she's so talented. And I remember when I met her, and I was like, I'm gonna like her. I can feel it. Who else? I think we had. Honestly, this past season there was like so many talented, and we had more than we usually had. And I was really, really proud of that group of people. I felt like even if they aren't, but I mean, obviously the priority is to support Black designers. But even if they aren't, I mean, I do try to just support younger designers who I know understand inclusivity and who really want to make sure that they are having a space in the industry. And so when I was at Teen Vogue, I did this program called Generation Next, and Elena Velez was part of it, and she just won at CFDA, and I was so proud of her. She's incredible talent. So it really is just young designers that I want to help, because I think that they I don't know, they have it hard. I think working in a magazine is very difficult, but I would not be a designer because I just couldn't do it. So yeah.
There definitely seems to be a vacuum right now in New York City as far as like I say open slots very loosely, but if you're thinking about the calendar, like opportunities for designers to have, you know, themselves put out there.
I mean, I think the calendar would open up. I think it's the money. That's
money needs to open up.
I think that's the thing that we don't really think about, is that we oftentimes as an industry provide visibility for designers, but we don't provide infrastructure and financing and advice on supply chain and, you know, profit margins, all things that will encourage long-term business. And I think that there's a lot of push to utilize Black designers for front-facing opportunities to make other people and absolve them of the right of responsibility around being inclusive, but then allowing those people to kind of die because they don't really give them the proper advice to like manage and navigate this business in the proper way. And I think that's something that we've got to change. You know, it's about, you know, a new business, a new brand in fashion, it takes about $10 million to be competitive.
Yeah, easily.
To start.
But they also only get, like I will say, most of the designers, when we talk to them for Black and Fashion Council, they're like, oh, magazines only reach out to us to put us in a roundup for Black History Month, and then they don't really know who we are. And so, I mean, we're one of our biggest things in the showroom is like we make you come and talk with this designer and touch the clothes and see what they're about, and we make the buyers come, like all of that. Like I think that people just don't actually take the time to even want to understand or know, because they feel like, well, that's not really my problem, and in reality it is. So
As far as obstacles, I wanted to ask you, Kyle, you have been part of, agencies and now are kind of moving within your own personal space. What has been the kind of biggest obstacle for you?
I mean, I think what's interesting is, because as a new business owner, No Smoking just started a month ago. I think the biggest challenge for me, honestly, is scale. And, but I will say the positive side of that is this community has been very supportive of me. And, and I mean people in this sphere, extended, and I'm very grateful for that. But I think through my career, I mean, the challenges have been not being seen, not being respected, not being expected. Moments where, I'm representing top talent, but then a customer thinks that I'm like an assistant or, the bag holder, or maybe a makeup person. No slight to a makeup person, but I'm running their business, negotiating the deals, and I'm the person that they actually talk to for the money, but they didn't think that I would be that person because I was Black. It's also been being micromanaged by, bosses and things that, I think a lot of people as executives in fashion, especially Black executives, go through a lot. Like I've heard about hairstylists having to deal with casting directors telling them about how to style hair. You know what I mean? And their responsibility is not in that space. For some reason, when it comes to us showing up in spaces, I think a lot of times you have a disregard for, people have a disregard for the gravitas of our business. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm sure, Lindsay, you could speak to the ideas of like, how are you treated as an editor-in-chief by some people? You know what I mean? And you're actually doing transformative work. It's such a big conversation, as Lindsay mentioned earlier. So it is always challenged. But I do see, because of the connectivity that an organization like Black in Fashion Council has set up, our congregation is starting to make sure that those conversations go away. And I intend to be invested in the community and do communal structured business in terms of reciprocal return, not just making money myself, but making sure that my business partners, meaning customers and creatives, also make money as well, in order to grow this thing and to eliminate the negativity that can sometimes surround our Blackness.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Lindsay, I want to turn the question over to you as well, as far as being someone who has done so much in a very short amount of time, but you're not an overnight success by no means. What kind of obstacles have you kind of faced in getting to where you are right now?
I always love this question because it's like, how do I
diplomatically?
I don't know. I just think the experience of Black women is so different. Man, I don't know. I always, my easiest way to answer it, the first time I think that the Times profiled me, I remember the writer asked me, she was like, if you had like a family member or a child, would you want them to be in the industry? Like, would you want them to work in fashion? I was like, absolutely not. And that's like the easiest way to answer it, because I think that a lot of times, Black women specifically, man, I feel like we just get the brunt of a lot of crap that we just don't deserve and didn't make a mess of, but are tasked to fix. And I think the obstacles have been different in each job, but I think the same ones as Kyle. Like, you're just constantly fighting for respect, space, resources, all of the things. And I think I don't know, I feel like there's something about being a Black woman that people feel like they want to try you more. I don't know what it is. And I think also just specifically in magazines, if you don't come from certain circles and certain schools and certain money, it just feels very differently. I feel like, when you're, running your own company and all of that, it's a little bit of a different beat in that sense. But obviously magazines have hierarchy and you have to work for people and all of that. And so I think I also, as a woman and as a Black woman, I think I also just struggled with trying to find out, like, I want to be able to sleep at night and have, a sense of character, integrity about myself and what kind of woman I want to be. And I think when you're trying to like impress all these other people, and that's just such a form of social currency. When you're a younger woman working at a magazine, you try to like impress your bosses and all of that. It took me a while to figure out, like, okay, so I'm may have to play this game and do these things right now, but there are certain things that I will do and there are certain things that I will never will do. And I think that is a fork in the road for a lot of Black women, of like how much can I take, honestly.
And as far as who you
yeah.
focused on as far as Hollywood subjects this year, I feel like you've definitely made your mark. And like what kind of excited you this past year as far as entertainment?
I don't know. I still always feel like the underdog. I don't mind it. I think that people continuously. I think we both have felt like people just underestimate you and think that they just set limitations on what they think is possible for your own life. And so when I came back to the cut, I had a lot of ideas of things that I wanted to do, but I'm very. I don't know. I think that a lot of times, I've been in many circles where people have been like, oh, that'll never happen. And I'm like, speak for yourself, bro. I don't care. Like, I think that a lot of it for me has felt like I want to make work that in the long run I will be very proud of, and not is just reacting to the news cycle right now. And so just doing something different in the space, and also just not focusing on making beautiful imagery, actually telling a story that is really important. And so, yeah, I wanted to do both the Megans, and I had to like just big ideas for the year that I was like, okay, like I've been here, I've been in this job a year, I have to take it to the next level. How do I want to do that? And it really also just came from a place of feeling like Black women are constantly disrespected, and that we're not given the space to control our own narrative, that we're constantly told, this is how you should perform, this is how you should act, this is how you should be, this is how you should look. And so I had a list of people that I felt really aligned with that. And I think it, for me, just, was really important that I don't want to do the work just because other people, or this person's popular, or this person has an Instagram following, or anything like that. I don't care. It really is more so that I want to make work that feels like it's going to last a lifetime, and that I think will make Black girls proud, and that's all I care about.
I think it's also amazing the fact that you've been able to put on like so many amazing creatives as well. Like you talk about Campbell Addy, Jessica Willis, like all these photographers and fashion editors that you've been able to really make sure that, along with you wanting to do these things and highlight these artists, you're also trying to put on the creative community. It seems like a very full circle moment.
Yeah, you have to help everybody up. Kyle's been so tremendously helpful to me. I could call him and ask him, and I have. And that's the only way that things are going to get better, is if we all help each other and help each other up. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that. But also, I'm not beholden to try to use, this person always does so and so. Like I want to be able to give people a chance. And I think especially in magazines, people get have a very narrow definition of like who is good enough for certain opportunities, or who's good enough to put on the cover, who's good enough to do this person's makeup, or who's a good enough photographer, all of that. And so I always just like to throw people a curveball and surprise them and show them like, oh wait, you thought this wasn't possible, and here we are. So yeah, I think that always is helpful, and it changes stuff for people's careers also. I think people don't recognize that. Like you may think it's a small thing, but that really changes people's trajectory, people's ability to pay bills. Like it changes a lot.
I think about the fact that, this space, fashion, is such a tremendous space of possibility. And most of us have come from small towns in the world to pursue very big dreams and work in very big spaces, and you do. And weirdly, once you start doing that, people start to tell you that you can't do big things. But the craziest thing is, the hardest thing was to get around yourself, leave that small town, and get into this business and be successful in the business. So if you're capable of doing that, you're capable of doing anything. And that's my message to everybody, is that don't let people micromanage you to the middle. Mm-hmm. And what I always appreciate about you is you don't take no for an answer. And you're like, it's bigger, badder, better always. And I think that's why we love each other, is because I see things the same way. And when I formulated no smoking, it was really kind of inspired by the fact that I always realized that clients that were represented by agencies and management, they were always kind of rolling their eyes about their managers, even though they were successful in their business, because they weren't being heard fully. They were being sent to do a thing in one space, and they wanted to do more. They were ambitious enough to say, I want to take over the world. And then their managers, the people who initially believed in them to a point, started to limit them and tell them that they weren't capable and these things can't happen and they haven't happened. And it became frustrating for a lot of people. And so that's why the eye roll was there. And as a manager, I did not pay attention to that. I watched it and I paid attention to it to the point where it inspired me to make sure that I didn't discount idea making, but I turned those ideas from a 7 to a 10. So it's not to say it can't happen, it's just say how big can it be, and let's go really hard and let's go really amazing. And fuck it, if it doesn't work out, we'll do something else amazing. Mm-hmm. But I think that's where we all have to be. And I think, we're not here by chance. This is not a charity exercise. And I think we just have to really hone in on the atomic nature of our individuality and imagine when that comes together how crazy that is. So that's where I'm at.
Where's the moment? Because entrepreneurship scares living hell out of me. And I'm doing it myself, but I don't know what I'm doing. But how do you get to the moment where you work for, and mind you, it's the fashion
Irene,
MO.
you know me.
I know you.
I'm a masochist. I've always been, anybody who knows me, they know I'm a masochist. I literally walk into fires knowing that it's going to be crazy. And I'm like, all right, we'll figure it out somehow, some way. I mean, I think all of us, I think everybody in this room, we're not fashion people, we're firefighters. And if you really think about firefighters, like if I see a fire personally, I freak out. I scream, I run. It's not a thing. But a firefighter looks at a fire and they're like, where are the people in the building? Where's the hose? Show me the ladder. But I got to get this shit done. I got to make sure that that thing doesn't take people's lives. It doesn't take the property away. And it's just another day at work. And I think if we start to normalize our ambition, normalize inclusion and diversity, normalize appreciation of atomic beings, we'll be in a much better space.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to what you were mentioning slightly, Lindsay, as far as that sense of community and outside of the initial initiative that I mentioned as far as designers, the main purpose of Black in Fashion Council was almost as a directory for people to say, if you are saying that you can't find certain people in hair and set design and makeup, here's a list, right? And how did you guys first come upon the mindset that we need to put ourselves out there more, and if we have a collective list, this might be something that also helps the industry, and how has that list set grown?
Yeah. It's funny because actually when we put out a list the first time, we just sent out, I remember I emailed you, and we just sent out it in PDFs to a bunch of the brands because everybody kept asking us. Or my real pet peeve was when they would send it, get on a call and be like, hey, we did this shoot and we think we're going to get canceled for it. Can you tell me? And I'm like, you're definitely going to get canceled for this. It's terrible. I hate doing retroactive work. Just be proactive, please. And so a lot of it was, we were doing that for months, just sending people PDFs and imagery at night. I do have a day job. And we were just sending it to brands all the time because they kept saying oh my gosh, we literally cannot find a person that we need. But I think also more so to me, it was the fact that a lot of brands would have a very either they would think of like 3 Black photographers, they would think of like, oh, this person did this cover, this person did this, and they didn't want to take the time, honestly. Like, it wasn't like it's not out there, they just didn't want to take the time, or they felt like we don't feel like these people are prestigious enough. And I think that that's something that you come across in so many areas of fashion, where you want to work with talent, and you know, your boss may say, I don't think that person is cool enough or big enough or anything like that. And so a lot of the brands, even to this day, I think just struggle with like, well, you know, the biggest name photographers, they have been historically white photographers. And so I think for them, then they feel like, oh, we want that kind of accolade. We want to be in that level, but like, we don't know where to go for that. And I think a lot of it is just retraining a lot of the people to understand that like, our work is just as good, honestly, better in my opinion, and that it is more so about you just changing the thinking around it, but also a lot of times I felt like there's a disconnect between when they want to hire someone and they say, okay, this photographer is amazing, but they're really racist. And to me, it's like, well, then that doesn't meet the threshold of the kind of person that you should be working with, right? Like, this is common sense, but stick with me. But to me, it's more so choosing your values. Like, is it more important for you to have a pretty image, or to be a company that people can actually trust and value, and your POC employees actually feel like you care and you take this seriously? And so I think a lot of times it ends up becoming a bigger conversation than they're honestly ready for, because then they're like, wait, like, I didn't realize I was making that decision. I thought I was just choosing creative for this shoot. And it's like, no, it actually is everything. All the little things add up to something. And being incredibly intentional with the kind of people that you work with says something to not just, consumers. It says something to people that also work there. So we were doing that for a while, and then obviously we had partnered with Color of Change to have the directory out, which is expansive to hairstylists and makeup artists and set designers and photographers, all of that. But that's something that, we've gone on a million calls with brands on, and it's quite fascinating, yes.
And they're still calling,
Oh my God, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It everybody has their own reasons behind it. And you know from they use the words, all of the words of like, what is my current favorite? I think it's like
I actually love the fact that most people now, because altruism seems to be a strategy for success, they're all sitting around talking about how altruistic they are, but they actually just care about making money.
Yeah.
And so they'll use social movements to position themselves in image spaces, which makes it's like, you're not a politician, you're not a change maker in terms of politics. Mm-hmm. So why would you care? Like, why would you even address that in your business? And so to your point, I think there's a lot of performative advocacy that really is not substantive. Like, it's the brand that puts the plus model in the show but doesn't produce the clothes for plus women to buy.
Mm-hmm. Or they only make the black dress, which is even more annoying, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, and then they'll say and tout that one person as their advocacy for the group, but then they don't even represent and or address them in their commercial address. So it's making people responsible for not just presenting pretty pictures to cover really bad foundations. I think it's like, you've got to build the foundation first and then paint the house.
And we've also gotten a lot of brands recently, the past couple of years, but still just be like, oh, so like, what are you guys going to do specifically for Black History Month or International Women's Day? And it's like, there are other times of the year. Stop asking me this. And so it's getting them out of the thinking that there's only times that you can step into this. And if you're going to be an ally, it's a 365 days a year kind of job. It's not just something that you should be doing at those times. So
it's like, you think about the queer, like, I'm a queer man, and June is Queer Month, and there's always like the purple boot that none of us gays would ever wear, but gets presented to the public. Like, it's just like that thing that we got to get away from, but yeah.
Absolutely. And that performative cloud kind of sullies, I wonder, does it sully the effort, right? Because obviously you still need to do these things in order to get the equity that we so desire, but how do you kind of bridge that gap between making sure that you're putting people out there and putting them into, I mean, I don't know if you can even say you can put them into a quote-unquote safe space, but not just setting them up for brands that just want to take advantage.
Well, if you actually invest in people and the gravity of their offering and incorporate that into your commercial address long term, it actually is more transformative than the monthly address of like Black History Month and Gay Pride Month. You know, like there's lots of great people that are featured in those months that we kind of don't really take the depth of their being and incorporate it into the commercial address. And people would make a lot more money doing that. But instead, because of prejudice, they only see a very short-sighted goal line when there's like a big, long play around the corner that is so much more important and so much more transformative to the bottom line.
Also, no, that-
I also think, I mean, it gets complicated because we could see Black people doing or supporting an organization that I'm like, why would you do that? Like they don't even like us. But everybody has their own role to play, and I'm not a hater of that. And I think that like we all have different parts and to play in this, and so I don't also down that. Like I think there's a lot of things that I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna change anything, or I don't think that I would do that, or I know that brand is really racist even though they're paying you a lot. So I think everybody has to play their part in it. But I also think that's kind of the point, that we all need to be doing it, because I mean, I'll never forget when I was talking to Mama B, Beth Ann, I call her Mama B,
As do I.
about Black in Fashion Council stuff. She was like, look, like nobody complains that there's too many breast cancer organizations. Everybody's trying to find a cure for breast cancer. So you go about your business and do what you need to do, and this is what you are called to do right now. So I think we all play our part, and that's the most important thing.
And it all contributes, it all comes down to the final collective. I mean, Kyle, you have managed the careers of people who were the first to be here, the first
Which
to
is
be
embarrassing.
there. Yeah.
I started in 1996, not like in 1968. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, will we get past the first photographer, the first, like, do you still feel like fashion is still taking too much time to kind of bridge the gap between these areas where I feel like it's just still, people are not getting it. People are not understanding that you need to be diverse. You need to, move the industry to a place that is representative of the entire world for the money, for, the money that you want to make. It seems like, obviously you've managed the careers of some of those, lovely models, but, in your new venture, where are we kind of right now? Do you think we're done with firsts?
I think as Black people, we've been subjugated to over, hundreds of centuries of subpar understanding. So like, there's going to be a lot more firsts, for sure. But I will say that in communal working, we can actually get to having a lot of people at the table and actually having equity in conversations and building business so that we can get around that eventually. But I think we're still going to deal in it a little bit, for sure. Because we have a lot of ground to cover, and there's a lot of spaces, even though it's the year of our Lord 2022. There's a lot of things that have not happened yet, which should have happened, but they didn't. So yeah, I think we will be in that space for a while.
Absolutely. And Lindsay, as far as everything that you've done, both in your 9 to 5 and outside of that, what's the next? 9 to 5, 5 to 9,
sure.
right? Yeah. What's next? What are you looking forward to in the new year as far as initiatives for Black in Fashion Council and expanding, the initiative?
Next year, honestly, we're talking a lot about going to smaller cities. I'm not from here. I think we always talk about a lot of this stuff, requires people to come here or LA, and everybody's able. And so I want to make sure that we're doing stuff in some smaller cities. So we've talked about going to Detroit and Chicago and Austin and other places, and going there and kind of highlighting and helping other Black-owned brands and stores like that. Like we're really good friends with Sherry McMullen, who has a space in the Bay Area. So we're trying to do stuff with her, just in other spaces, so we can make sure that everybody is getting the support and the finances and the help and whatever they need that we can help with. So.
Any plans for global expansion?
We've talked about it a ton. We have. I mean, it's a long process, and also I feel like I would need to take off work to do that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you have a 9 to 5. You're doing this on your off time.
I
Just
have
trying
emails to do right now.